Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's webinar presentation, Transforming School Climate, an Evidence-Based Toolkit for Districts. My name is Maria Nuesti and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Before we get started, I do want to go over a few housekeeping rules for everybody on the call. The presentation will be recorded, so do not worry about taking notes. We will send you a copy of the recording and the presentation after the webinar. For attendees, you are in listen-only mode, so you will not be able to speak to us directly. However, we want this conversation to be very interactive today. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to notice an interface that will allow you to submit questions. Please submit questions along the way. We've reserved time at the end to answer all of those. And finally, for those of you that are on social media, please connect with us at Cognito on Twitter, and also follow along with the conversation with the hashtag CognitoWebinars if you have any additional questions or thoughts you'd like to share with your audience. With that, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. I am joined by Jennifer Spiegler, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Cognito. Jennifer joined the team in 2010 with a background spanning in education, business, and not-for-profit sectors in areas such as instructional design, strategic communications, fundraising, and art administration. Prior to joining Cognito, Jennifer served as the Assistant Director of the Columbia Center for New Media Teaching and Learning. And here at Cognito, she leads the K-12 and government practice area. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our presenter, Jennifer Spiegler. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Maria, and thank you everybody on the phone today. I know that your time is precious. If you're working in a school or a district, everything you do needs to have value, and I hope we bring you that value today. If you don't know Cognito, we are a leading health simulation company that's focused on improving social, emotional, and physical health by harnessing the power of conversations. We are proud to partner with many national leaders in school, mental health and behavioral health. We count among our partners Sharon Hoover and Nancy Lever, the directors of the National Center for School Mental Health, Olga Price and Rachel Sadlon at the Center for Health and Healthcare in Schools, and amazing folks out there like Janet Posmentier at the MHA of Greater Houston, who directs their Center for School Behavioral Health. It's an honor to work with all of these folks, and they're more numerous than I can mention. I would just add real quick, Shashank Joshi at Stanford and Michael Long at George Washington University, who are two of our research partners, as well as some of our subject matter experts, like Marlene Wong, who's a subject matter expert on our trauma program, and Scott Poland and Rich Lieberman on suicide postvention. So we really have been blessed by being able to tap into the expertise of all these folks and bring along our expertise in instructional design and delivery of these evidence-based tools. So just a little bit about the background of our work in the K-12 arena. Actually, we got to K-12 by way of higher education. Many of you will remember in 2007, there were shootings at Virginia Tech University, and our founders thought, how can we, using our conversation platform, help reduce the chances of an event like that happening ever again? And how can we help university faculty identify, approach, and refer students in distress before a tragic event happens? And we developed the first tool in our toolkit for higher education. But right on the heels of that, the state of Texas came along and said, we really need this for our high schools. And our work in the K-12 space was born. So we've been doing this work for almost a decade. And that portfolio to address numerous topic areas has grown organically in response to the needs of schools and school districts. We were very moved by the events of Hurricane Harvey and partnered in Houston with the Center for School Behavioral Health to address the ramifications of displacement and tragedy around Hurricane Harvey. And I myself just returned from Broward County Public Schools, where we are working to pilot our programs in that district that is anticipating the anniversary of the Parkland shooting. So it's not just big events. We know that every day, in many, many ways, there are multiple things we can do to help students be healthy and succeed, and help schools be healthy and succeed. And that is our mission. Next slide, please. So what's happening now in the universe, as you on the phone are probably very, very well aware, is that we are in a transition now between the era of No Child Left Behind and the Every Student Succeeds period, which really goes from a very narrow focus on testing and academic success to a much broader and more encompassing focus on the whole child. And behavior and social emotional learning are a big focus in ESSA, and there's even funding to support those kinds of initiatives, and schools and districts and states are being measured on those kinds of initiatives. So it's no secret that, I think to most of you on the phone, that it's not only that academic success is a result of many, many different ingredients. Next slide. And as we were thinking about this, we were thinking about all of these non-academic areas as kind of the soil that nurtures the whole child. From district policies and procedures, frameworks like MTSS and PBIS, and the kind of data that goes into thinking about that nurturing soil, to all of the programming that folks like you are putting in place to ensure that school climate is positive, that students are going to school feeling safe, that students' mental health and suicide ideation are being addressed early, and intervention is happening early. More and more schools are seeing the adoption of trauma-informed practices, bullying prevention, and a focus not only on the social-emotional learning of students, but of the social-emotional learning of their adults. Just a couple of things that I was reading. For example, an article entitled, "What Do Test Scores Miss? The Importance of Teacher Effects on Non-Test Score Outcomes," by an author at Northwestern University, who says, "Good teachers may affect students much more broadly than their impact on achievement test scores." And looking at data from 570,000 students in North Carolina, this researcher found that ninth grade teachers who improved their students' non-cognitive skills, motivation, the ability to adapt to new situations, self-regulation, had important impacts on those students' long-term achievement. The American Psychological Association talks about students in schools with positive climates. They have better school attendance and better study habits. They're more motivated. They're more committed to succeed academically. They engage in more cooperative learning. They have higher grades, test scores, and subject mastery. So even though we know schools are really focused on student success and academic outcomes, paying attention to this soil is really important. Next slide, please. So the question goes back out to you all. What does your soil need? What is the ingredient? What is the nitrogen? What is it aerated? Is there sand? Is there what is needed in your school's soil? We've worked with Fairfax County Public Schools, for example, where they brought us in to support mental health and suicide prevention. Fairfax County was a district that had weathered a suicide cluster over several years and couldn't find enough tools to address that very important issue. They're now one of the most proactive school districts in the country around suicide prevention and mental health. In the New York City Public Schools, they discovered that their very well-articulated bullying prevention program, Respect for All, had a great training for their Respect for All liaisons. That's one person at least in every school who's responsible for the bullying prevention programming and policies and procedures. But that person only got trained once. What could they do to support more bullying prevention boosters and move that learning out into the training for all teachers and staff, 75,000 teachers in the New York City Public School system? And again, in Texas, Hurricane Harvey struck in 2017. They were looking for trauma-informed practices to go across 31 school districts that had been affected by Hurricane Harvey. They were already doing trauma-informed practices. The question is, how do we scale up? How do we scale up to systems that are supporting almost 250,000 students? So you might need, if we go back to the tree metaphor, you might need one of these kinds of program elements, or you might need all of these program elements. Our position here at Cognito is that every one of these topics has important conversations that take place, and those conversations really help bring that soil alive. Maria has a poll question now for you, and so I'm going to hand it to her.
So the question is, following what Jennifer just went over about what does your soil need? For those on the call today, tell us, what does your school need most today? Is it mental health and suicide prevention, trauma-informed practices, bullying prevention, addressing a loss at school, social emotional learning as part of your curriculum, or a combination of all of these? So just take a second to just let us know and share with the rest of the audience what is it that you need most today, and what are you working towards in the near-term future to address? And when we're talking about addressing a loss at school, it involves any death within the school, whether it is postvention or any other cause of loss that may happen within the school community. So let's see what the results are. Let's share that with our audience. And it looks like for most of you, it's a combination of a couple of things, but most pressing is definitely social emotional learning as part of your curriculum, followed by trauma-informed practices. And I think that's a reflection of what's happening out in the climate with policies and legislation being passed to fund some of those resources, followed by mental health and suicide prevention. Again, a lot of that is being driven by legislation and mandates that are happening across states. And then bullying prevention, and of course, addressing loss at school. So thank you for those that participated, and I'll pass it back over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Maria. So how do we here at Cognito create a school climate toolkit for you in districts? As I mentioned, we got our start in K-12 through programming for high school teachers looking at mental health and suicide prevention. So kind of the upper right-hand corner of your slide. That wasn't enough. Districts needed middle school. Lots of states had legislation requiring suicide prevention and mental health training for teachers in secondary schools. So middle school was a natural progression. And then we were asked about training for elementary schools. And this year, we're adding pre-K to our the way we address student mental health and psychological distress. Obviously, we're not having too many preschool students die by suicide. I hope none. But certainly, early intervention is a growing concern, and there's a growing movement to providing universal pre-K and pre-K opportunities, early childhood education across the country. Bullying prevention is something that we address in two different ways. We look at bullying of LGBTQ students, and we know that students who are LGBTQ have higher rates of suicide. They have higher rates of truancy and missing school because they don't feel safe. But there's lots of other issues around bullying. So bullying prevention is another piece of our toolkit. The third piece of our toolkit is trauma-informed practices, which I mentioned we developed in conjunction with the folks at the Center for School Behavioral Health at Mental Health America of Greater Houston and UNICEF USA as part of our response to Hurricane Harvey. But that program doesn't look at hurricane response. That program looks at the kind of chronic trauma and adverse childhood experiences that kids are much more likely to experience on a regular day-to-day basis. That could be having a parent with a substance use issue. That could be living in a community where there's violence. That could be having a tragedy happen in the household. So, but all of those situations heighten the ability of teachers to respond and to think beyond the student in front of them to what are those things that that student has experienced before they even walk through our doors, and how can I as a teacher support them and make them feel more comfortable in my classroom. Social emotional learning is a topic that we address not only through all of our professional development, helping adults model self-regulation and communication skills, but also helping students learn those skills as well, in addition to framing that with mental health and suicide prevention topic area content so that they know what is their role when a friend that is suffering, or how do they best support their friend and by extension themselves. And addressing a loss at school, Maria mentioned, we are launching a new program in April of this year to address suicide postvention, but also addressing a loss in a younger area of school. So these are a growing toolkit of programs based in evidence-based practices such as motivational interviewing, but also with their own evidence base from our own studies and studies by other researchers about outcomes, not only pre to post training, but showing sustained behavior change as a result of taking the simulation.
I just want to jump in and sort of ask you a couple of questions that have popped a lot now from our audience, and a challenge that administrators are often facing is how can they prepare their educators on managing some of the things that may come up, like classroom behaviors or biased language that may happen in the classroom where the teacher may be reacting to an incident?
Great question. We do that by actually modeling classroom interactions, both in our Step In, Speak Up anti-bullying for supporting LGBT students, and in the bullying prevention module. We model teachers intervening directly with incidents of bullying and the use of biased language. So it helps teachers be prepared in advance of encountering those incidents. What am I going to do when the inevitable happens? What are some things I can do ahead of time? Prepare, for example, a behavior contract with my students so that if incidents of bullying or use of biased language happen in my classroom, I have something to point to that is a contract that we all signed and agreed to. We agreed to have respectful behaviors at school. I will know how to best address these situations because I have encountered them in the virtual classroom before handling them in the actual classroom. Great question.
A follow-up question is, what is the relationship between the educator and the school mental health staff? How does these tools prepare, sort of connect the dots from incidents that happen in the classroom when the teacher is interacting with the students for the most part of the day and making that connection to the resources that are available within the school?
That's another great question. So a lot of our work that supports teachers is really helping the teacher understand what the boundaries of their roles are with respect to students. We know that teachers are in the classroom to teach. They're not mental health professionals for the most part. Once in a while you'll have somebody with a social work degree, but they're not mental health professionals. So what we're hoping, or what we are training them for, is to use their existing relationship with students to identify somebody's on the phone. Excuse us. We have a interruption. So to identify students in the classroom, but be able to use their relationship with those students to talk with them, find out what's really going on, and create the conditions for a warm handoff to mental health support. So that means hurdling barriers to perhaps accessing support from the school counselor or local mental health resources, or the teacher who might be best suited to supporting LGBTQ students in the classroom. So we really want teachers to teach. What we don't want teachers to do is feel that they need to solve every kid's problem or be their counselor. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that kind of previews a little bit or sets up how does a cognito simulation work. So for anybody who is on the line who's never seen one of our simulations, these are pretty unique in the world of teacher professional development. You go online, you create an account in our system, you would see a menu that has various chapters, and among those chapters are opportunities to engage in interactive role-play conversations with virtual students or virtual parents or virtual peers. And the way this works is that the user is going to interact with a fully animated at-risk virtual student, navigate through the scenarios by selecting what to say to that student. You'll get instant feedback from your coach and personalized performance summary when you complete. But let's, instead of talking about it, let's just go to the demo. So we would like to show you a live demo of this tool. So you see the teacher on the left-hand side and the student, Stephanie, on the right-hand side of your screen. You are taking on the role of the teacher. And what you've noticed by way of background that you would have received in getting into this situation is that Stephanie has been leaving your class early to go to the nurse on many occasions in the last few weeks. She's a good student. She's been a great student. But this is kind of perplexing behavior on her behalf. So you are going to talk to Stephanie using this dialogue menus, and you can either choose to give her a warning because running out of your class and going to the nurse every day is not acceptable behavior, or you could make an observation, and there's several different ways to make the observation. So you could say you've gone to the nurse's office several times and be very specific in what you've observed. You could say, you've been acting a little strange in class lately, which is, you know, really how you feel about it. Or you could say, it seems like you haven't been feeling yourself lately. Well, let's try to give Stephanie a warning and see how that goes.
You really can't be leaving class all the time like you have been.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I in trouble?
Okay, so you learn a lot about Stephanie. Stephanie is an emotionally active virtual student. You can hear her voice. She's upset. She's distressed. You know, her voice went up. She's looking around. But you also have some other feedback. Your coach, Jackie, says, by immediately disciplining Stephanie, you're missing an opportunity to find out if there are valid reasons for her behavior. As a teacher, you are in a great position to notice changes in student behavior and help students find solutions that could have a long-term impact. And another level of feedback that you're getting is here. So your comfort meter is telling you that she came in with a moderate level of comfort, and that comfort has decreased with that choice. So fortunately, we created the undo button, not for real life, but just for you on the phone. So you can undo that choice and see what would have happened under another circumstances. So we can't give her a warning anymore because we already chose that. Now we can make an observation. Let's try the top one, the first one.
I couldn't help but notice that you've left class to go to the nurse's office several times this week.
Yeah, I haven't been feeling that good.
You've also seemed quieter in class lately, which surprises me because I thought you were enjoying the ancient Greeks.
I do. They're super cool. It's just, things have been not great.
Okay, and Jackie has some more feedback for you. Let's click on that. She says, good job. By bringing up specific, observable behaviors, you broached the topic in a way that didn't make Stephanie defensive. As a result, she started to open up and share how she's been feeling lately. Let's make a couple more choices, and you can see how this progresses. Okay, now we have the opportunity to follow up with her in various ways or to share information. Let's say, is there something here at school? Let's try to find out more.
Is it something here at school?
Well, yeah, maybe.
Okay, so anybody who knows anything about motivational interviewing knows that if you ask a closed-ended question and you get a yes or no answer, it's not going to take you very far. So let's see what else we could have asked Stephanie to help her open up a little bit. So let's offer her a little bit of help.
If there's anything I can do to help, I'd like to.
Really?
It's important to me that when you're at school, you feel comfortable, safe, happy to be here.
Thanks. Well, there's this boy in Mr. Brongard's class across the hall, Jordan, and whenever he sees me, he always, says a bunch of stuff and gets other kids to laugh at me.
Okay, that sounds pretty awful if you're a middle school kid. And Jackie says, good job by letting Stephanie know that you care about her. You made her feel comfortable opening up. So you can imagine that Stephanie, if you had just let this go, may not just go to the nurse's office early. She may stop coming to school. Her grades might go down. This could get out of control. So this just gives you a little bit of a sense of how these conversations work. In this conversation, your goal is to help Stephanie problem solve around this bullying situation, let her know that this is not okay at school, talk to her about escalating the complaint against this other boy, and all the things that you would do within the boundaries of your bullying prevention policy. So, let's see. Sorry, we have another poll for you. So if you weren't paying attention, you have to pay attention now. Thanks, Maria.
Here we go. So we're going to do our second poll question, and this one is, you saw a little bit about the bullying simulation, but of course, as Jennifer mentioned, there are multiple different simulations in the toolkit as you're planning to address some of the gaps that you talked about or insinuated with the previous poll question. So if you're interested in learning more about each of these: mental health, suicide prevention, trauma-informed practices, bullying prevention, addressing a loss at school, or the social emotional learning curriculum programs are in this toolkit, we'd be happy to send you a full link so you can see the entire conversations are involved. You can engage with the virtual students and learn more of the didactics that's built in to build skills and knowledge on each of these topics for educators. So let's see what are some of the responses that we're getting here. And I think this aligns well with what folks were saying. They're very interested in learning more about trauma-informed practices, definitely the social emotional learning curriculum as well, mental health and suicide prevention coming in, and then bullying prevention and addressing a loss at school. So we'll make sure to send, for those that participated in the poll, we'll make sure that you get those links after the webinar.
Okay, so a question that we get often is, how do you know this stuff really works? There's plenty of professional development and curriculum out there to help raise awareness about these topics. But again, what we really want people to do is something different once they've left one of these simulations. And I want to add that these simulations vary in length, but the shortest one is 25 minutes to half an hour, and the longest one is an hour to an hour and a half, depending. Of course, you can see you can do a lot of undos. You have a lot of opportunities for reflection when you're making choices. So the completion time will vary a lot from user to user, but this is a way to expedite the pace of learning and really empower people to do something differently. We know that because we, with all of our simulations, do pre-post and follow-up surveys. The pre and post are delivered on either side of the training itself, and the follow-up is something that we email to each of the learners either at a 60 or 90-day post-training timeline. And what we have found is statistically significant changes from baseline to follow-up. For example, in the mental health programs, about the number of students that we've been concerned about, the number of students who've been approached to discuss their concerns, and the number of students who are referred to support services. And we have done this with tens of thousands of teachers. So the effect size is really quite high for those of you interested in stats. So if you're thinking about this at the level of a school, for every 100 educators trained, we would estimate that they would identify an additional 54 students in the building who might have mental health concerns. They would talk with an additional 52 students, and they would engage in additional conversations about a referral with 39 of those students or their parents. So at the level of a school that might have 100 educators, probably has 1,000 to 1,500 students, these aren't numbers that are going to overwhelm the counseling services or the mental health services staff, but really identifying students of concern and moving them into the hands of people who can help. Okay, and the other thing we measure, of course, is we know teachers and school staff are experts in schools. So we also ask them, as a result of the knowledge and skills acquired through cognito simulations, users say, applying what I learned in this simulation is likely to have a positive impact on rapport between myself and my students. 93% agreed with that statement. Student attendance will increase, 75%. agreed with that statement. Student academic success will improve. 86% agreed with that statement. And the learning environment will become safer and more supportive. 96% agreed with that. And overall safety will improve. 96% said that. So we're not saying that this is, we didn't design specifically and narrowly or broadly. We didn't say, okay, school climate, we didn't design a school climate intervention, comprehensive school climate intervention. We designed a series of professional development and student curriculum that teachers on the ground are saying, this is going to help us achieve these goals. That's me. Sorry, we went back a little too far. So, better attendance, better academic outcomes, higher graduation rates even, but doing it through this nurturing of the soil. I would leave you with that image and that thought that, creating a soil for your students to grow in, for your school to blossom, is really what we're here to do and to help you with. And we think that the power of conversations is really an underutilized tool to do that. Of course, you have policies and procedures in place, but every one of those conversations is an opportunity to impact the school climate. Maria has some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Again, I want to encourage everybody on the call to submit questions about the presentation and the topic that Jennifer covered. The first thing that I want to bring up as a question that came in is, obviously, time is one of the biggest constraints in addition to budget, but how can a toolkit like this be implemented in a way that's practical and can be done immediately, given that a lot of districts are looking to address a couple of issues at a time?
Well, the nice thing about these systems are that they're pretty easy to get up and running. We can guarantee that people who want to use our tools can have access to them within 2 weeks of contracting, and oftentimes we're even faster than that. So I don't think that so that seems pretty quick. They're also very self-contained, so they're easy to roll out. We have a client services team that helps you get set up, regardless of how large or small your district is, making sure all your schools are in our drop-down list and correctly creating groups so that you can look across different schools to see how many people have participated. We sometimes also integrate our reporting with your own professional development systems and learning management systems. So we really have created what is a turnkey approach to putting these simulations in the hands of users as quickly as possible with as low a resource impact on district offices. Can I answer the question?
I think so. Yes, thank you. The next question goes back to the social emotional learning curriculum and the program you have for that. Can you talk a little bit more about how this is a tool that can be used for peer-to-peer mentoring? Is it an evidence-based tool for middle school and high school, and how does that usually work?
Our peer-to-peer tool is called Friend to Friend. It was developed for high schools, but it has been adopted by a number of middle schools successfully. We have developed 2 lesson plans. One is around mental health and suicide prevention. Another one is around social emotional learning. So it's really a unit that can be slotted in either to health class or life skills class or advisory or a club even. It's a flexible tool. It's really fun for the kids. It's really allows them to have their own experience of of that program, and we are looking to expand the topic areas that it covers. But it takes about 25 minutes for the students to use it, so you could do it as either a 1 or a 2 period learning experience.
Thank you, Jennifer. I see that we have a former content expert that's worked with Cognito on the line. Hi, Randy. Your question is, one of the questions that you hear from teachers and counselors is that, there's obviously time can limit the motivation to participate. So PD days can they do this on their own time? Can they do this from home? What does a typical PD day for Cognito simulation looks like?
God, Randy, you should be here doing this webinar, not me. We find, I would say, generally speaking, that this is rolled out as part of PD during an in-service or sometimes during a period of orientation before the school year starts. It can be slotted in and take a short period of time. We also publish discussion guides, because what we really think is the gold standard of implementation is to say, introduce the training, have people go away and take it, and then bring them back together for a group discussion about what did you learn, what experience did you have, and you can have very different experiences because these are very deep conversations with a lot of options, as you've seen. So you could also, if you don't want to do it in a PD day, you could, we know principals have said, please do this at home, we'll skip our weekly staff meeting, or you can do it during prep time. So it's a really flexible tool. Right now, it's operable on most current laptops, but within this year, we're hoping to be able to announce that it's available on mobile devices and phones as well.
Thank you very much. The next question is, are you still doing work with American Indian Alaskan Native communities? And so what are the next steps to move that forward if you are doing some work there?
We have been continuing to work with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention's Training and Technical Assistance Center. We are a little unsure about the future of that, but currently they are supporting access to friend-to-friend on mobile devices and for the trauma-informed policing. They have discontinued the access to at-risk for high school educators, but there are a lot of tribal organizations that might be interested in supporting use on tribal lands. There's currently a Garrett Lee Smith grant out and that tribes can apply for. There's Native Connections grants that tribes can apply for. I'm trying to think. So we do have some relationships at IHS, but I would just shoot us an email and let us know what you're interested in, and we will try to connect you either with somebody who has licenses or has funding to fund licenses. So thanks for the question. We hope we can continue to work in Indian country.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions have come in around reporting and tracking the effectiveness of the toolkit. So can you talk about how granular and how much control would a district have in tracking usage, or how many teachers have taken the training? And then also going back to your research that you had on the screen, how are they able to measure the impact that the toolkit is having in their district?
Awesome question. So, as I said, so the toolkit, the tools in the toolkit are great. The programs themselves are great. But what's really important for districts is being able to understand who in your district is using these tools and to what effect. So when we deploy the training, at the district level, it includes reporting on each of the simulations and by user and by school and as an aggregate for the district. If you're a large district, this is really data gold because you can see, or you're a state, so you can see all of your schools as a sort of peer-to-peer relationship, see who's using it, who's not using it, strategize about who you need to encourage, maybe find a mentor for that school nearby who's doing a great job. So the data is really handy. As I said, it can be integrated with your existing LMS if that's something you're desiring, or it's something usually can. And then surveys. So all of our simulations are delivered with pre, post, and follow-up surveys integrated. Those surveys can be customized if you have other questions that you want to ask or questions you want to remove. We've had clients wholesale change the surveys. And then we can provide you on a quarterly basis with that survey data. If you want us to analyze that survey data, that would incur a fee, but we can also do that. I see that there's a note in here from Perry Blankenship from McDowell County, West Virginia. I just want to say, Perry wants to tell you that the reports he gets are very informative about who's utilizing what they've implemented with Cognito. So Perry joined the Cognito family about a year ago, and using his Project Aware money has been able to train hundreds of teachers in McDowell County, and now moving on to training hopefully hundreds of students there as well. Hi, Perry.
Hello, Perry. Thank you for your comment. So with that, if there are no other questions, I will thank everybody in the audience for joining us today. As we said, for those of you who submitted poll responses, we'll make sure to send you those links to the toolkit for the needs that you're trying to meet in the upcoming school year or in the short term, as well as everyone on this call will receive the slides and the recording. So again, you will have access to this, and you can share this with your network or anybody who you think might be interested in hearing more information. Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any other closing thoughts you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I think the only thought I would like to share is really heartfelt thanks. I see now that Maria has showed me who's on the line. I know a lot of you. I thank you for joining us. I thank you for participating and all the work you do every single day to support youth. They need it. So thank you so much for taking the time, and we're just grateful to have you out there doing this work, and we'll keep doing our work. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.